Hi, my name is Andrea Morse, and I'm the Interim Assistant Director of Study Abroad at UW-Stout in the Office of International Education. Our office is hosting a number of virtual info sessions because even though we're all working and studying remotely, now is a good time to consider your options to study abroad as part of your future education at UW-Stout. Today, I'll be highlighting a program that would allow you to satisfy a Res A requirement while exploring cultural heritage in Cuba. I am very happy to have Dr. Kimmery Newsome, or Dr. K, as many call her, who is a faculty member leading this program here to speak about it, as well as Jason Koba, who is from the study abroad provider helping us to organize it. Before we share details about the program, I wanted to take just a minute to clarify the roles of the different people speaking to you today, since we do get questions from students about who does what. First, as part of the Office of International Education, my role is to meet with students to advise them on their study abroad opportunities, to market this program and others, to manage student applications, to help with organizing programs, and after the programs are done, to send out evaluations to students. Dr. Newsome is the Program Director of Human Development and Family Studies at UW-Stout. Dr. Newsome has designed this program focused on critical cultural competence and will, of course, be your instructor during and after the trip. She will also conduct a pre-departure orientation with you to lay out the itinerary in more detail and prepare you for the trip. API, as represented by Jason today, is what's called a study abroad provider. API specializes in running programs just like this one, helping Dr. Newsome design the program by suggesting sites and activities. They are also the logistics experts, providing guidance on where you'll stay, where you'll eat, and how you'll get from place to place. It's also important to note that in the context of Cuba, they are an approved company to host students since visits to the country are restricted and, in this case, limited to an educational focus. Finally, they'll have one of their staff available as an on-site coordinator the entire time you're in Cuba to help everything run as smoothly as possible and be there to help in case of emergencies. Okay, so let's talk about the program. You'll spend 14 days in Cuba, leaving on January 2nd and returning on the 16th. However, you should expect to complete a coursework after the trip as well, continuing until January 23rd. The program will earn you 3 credits and satisfy Res A. It is open to students who have a cumulative GPA of 2.0 or above and who are at freshman level or higher. So if you've completed your first term of your freshman year during fall, then your first opportunity to study abroad will be during WinTerm 2021. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Newsome, to share more about the program.
Sounds good. Thank you, Andrea.
Sure.
So critical cultural competence is what is considered a racial and ethnic studies A course for students at UW-Stout. And it also is a requirement for the HDFS major. One of the things that I think is really important in this course is that we provide students with an immersion into the material. That can only happen so much when you're in the classroom. I believe that having this program outside of the classroom is something that would be really beneficial to kind of hammer home the points and ideas that I want students in the classroom to be able to absorb and to retain. And so some of the course objectives, I have 2, for this course, since it's a WinTerm course. Usually there's about 7 for the full semester course, but the 2 that I felt like would be most beneficial for the Cuba trip are, 1, being able to demonstrate the awareness of one's own racial and cultural heritage. And then, in the process of that, being able to think about how you feel and the ways in which you understand your identity, and relating those to systems of difference, systems of privilege and oppression, and also having an awareness of how your values and biases and normative assumptions, meaning the things you've been taught, about how the world functions influences your ability to connect with people across cultures and races. And then the other one is demonstrated knowledge of the histories, cultures, and racialization experiences of African Americans, American Indians, Asian Americans, Latino Americans, and Euro Americans, and understanding how the sociocultural historical contexts shape the identities and relational dynamics of the program. And so there are a few assignments that you'll have over the course of the time that we are in country. And then there are a couple of assignments that you will have once we are done and back here in the States as well to finish out the course. And some of those assignments include you writing time, doing some reflecting on the places that we visited and the things that we've learned for that day in particular. We do things in the morning, we do things in the evening, and I know that Jason's going to talk more about the schedule and what that looks like, but I won't go into any detail with that. But some of the ways in which we will do debriefings or even class time is talking about demystifying ideas about the impact of cultural history on the Cuban people. And as Andrea mentioned, Cuba is not a relatively open country. And so we have a wonderful opportunity as an educational institution, as well as working with an educational program, to be able to go into the country and experience its culture and learn more about the things that we may not have had access to previously. And so we are in country for 14 days. And usually during that time, there's some individual reflection time. And some of the questions that I will have you answer, and this is just kind of consistent throughout, would be, in what ways does the knowledge you gain today affect your view of people who are different from you? How could I educate others about what I've learned? And how has racism, discrimination, and exploitation of difference played a part in the Cuban culture? And so that's just a really quick overview of the types of things that we will talk about, the types of things that we will kind of be on the lookout for, and just kind of the awareness that we'll have as we interact with the people, as well as with the different people who are providing educational time to us, and the ways in which we can continue to learn about cultural differences and be culturally competent in a more immersive way. So I hope that was helpful, Andrea.
It was, thank you. And could you share how the idea for this program came about and why Cuba was chosen as the destination?
Yeah, for sure. And so we, in conjunction with the former director of the Multicultural Student Organization, we talked about having the opportunity to have students who may not be apt to participate in study abroad, go on a trip and, leave their normal environments and be able to kind of immerse themselves in a culture with people who may, have some of the shared experiences in their own countries that they may have, the students may have here in the United States. And we chose Cuba because it's not very far away. And it's easily gotten to by plane. We don't have to do a whole lot of quote unquote international travel. We can do so on maybe 2 flights. And it also provides the students with an opportunity to see a diaspora as opposed to a singleized country. And so we'll talk more about that diaspora and kind of Afro-Cuban traditions and that sort of thing as well. But the whole premise was to be able to provide an opportunity for students who don't normally study abroad to be able to do so. So that's where the idea came from.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
And are there any specific outcomes you expect students to achieve by taking critical cultural competence as a study abroad course rather than in class?
Yeah, I want them to have kind of that hands-on experience. One of the assignments I used to have the students do is a cultural immersion assignment where they would have to find a group of people who practice different things. It could be religion, it could be just cultural heritage, it could be a wide variety of things, and they would immerse themselves in that for a day, if that. It had to be longer than 2 hours. But this experience, they actually will be immersed in the culture, and the culture will be all around them, and they will have to make the adjustments. They will have to be the ones to focus in on what's happening around them and really pay attention to how the culture and the communities operate. And so I think that that provides a better lens for people to be critically culturally competent. That's the hope. And when you think about critical, you think about, you look at something, you examine something in depth. Cultural, you look at a culture in depth. And incompetent, you provide an opportunity for the students to have some knowledge of how the culture or cultures function and the ways in which they can think critically about their interactions with people from certain cultures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, before we bring in Jason, I wanted to take a minute to talk about cost. The total estimated cost is $6,080, which includes the program fee of $5,550 that covers tuition and fees, airfare, local transportation, accommodation, cultural events, and some meals. The total cost also includes about $530 for out-of-pocket expenses, such as airline baggage fees, meals on your own, and spending money for souvenirs, etc. Finally, remember that we have a great section on our website called Finances, where you can learn about your options to use financial aid, apply for loans, and use scholarships and crowdfunding sites to finance your experience. Okay, now let's look at some of the places you'll be visiting on the program, because Cuba is amazingly beautiful. And we'll look at those photos while we chat with Jason from API. Jason, what is API's experience in Cuba?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very proud and happy to be part of this conversation, and I look forward to welcoming lots of UW-Stout students in Cuba. So API has been, as an organization, around for over 20 years, and we've been operating programs in Cuba since 2012. Since that time, we've operated more than 60 different faculty-led programs of this nature, including probably about 5 or 6 in a given section of time, so a spring break or a WinTerm each year for the past several years. We also were the first education organization allowed back into Cuba once the opportunity opened up, so we have some really, really great connections. And in addition to the short-term programs like this, we also operate semester, summer, and interim sessions through our partner universities in Havana and also in Santa Clara, Cuba. So we've got lots of time and experience in the country.
Excellent. And based on feedback from past participants, what are the most meaningful sites or activities for students?
Sure. So I've personally been a part of 5 different programs in Cuba that have all had a different focus. So it might be Spanish language and Cuban culture. I've done business programs, US-Cuban relation programs, as well as healthcare focused programs. So while their activities are a little bit different on each of those different programs, the thing that really stands out as being the most meaningful or having the most impact is the interaction that the US students have with the Cuban people. So in all of our programs, the way that it works is we design activities that are not just observational. Some of them are, but a lot of them are very interactive. And you really get a chance to talk with and to meet and to experience firsthand the Cuban people and to meet them. So there's a lot of different activities that you're seeing in these pictures here that are kind of the standard, if you will, things you have to see while you're in Cuba. And it's just every time you turn around, it's a really unique experience. And I think one of the biggest impacts that students say, and the things that I've heard them say more than often than not, is how resilient the Cuban people are and how interesting it is to see them be able to adapt without having access to the same kinds of facilities that we have here or the same kinds of supplies and things of that nature. So it's not necessarily a single activity per se, but rather just a general feeling of being in awe of what the Cuban people have been able to accomplish. That being said, there is one particular excursion which is built into the program to a trip to Las Terrazas, which is a biosphere community outside of Havana, which is absolutely a favorite. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. There's typically time for being outside in nature, and you get to experience some of the beautiful countryside of the country as well, in addition to the city of Havana.
Great. And can you tell us more about the in-country role of API, that is, during the program?
Sure. So the role of API starts really at the very beginning. So in addition to the program development side of it, once we have everything set and all the details arranged, we actually start working with you and start being part of the program as a true member of the program in the US. So what happens is a US staff member, in this case, hopefully myself, but someone from API that's based in the US will actually travel with the group or travel with the students to Havana. So we facilitate the visa process and make sure that they're all good to go and that international component of the travel. So we start here and travel with you there. And then literally we're with you every moment of the program from the beginning to the end. So what we do is help you navigate the immigration process and get your luggage and get you on the buses. And we've arranged all of the logistics and everything of that nature. So we serve as a source of emergency support and services throughout the entire program. We have 24/7 availability. So in addition to the US staff member that travels with you, we have our full-time resident director in Cuba, Emily. Emily's actually an American who's been in Cuba for a number of years. She studied abroad there and fell in love with the country. So she's been living there as an expat for quite some time. But she's also there to add an additional level of support. And then per Cuban law, we actually have a Cuban guide with us the entire time as well. So we have our API guide that's with you, the program leader, a Cuban guide that helps us understand and serves as a translator. And then we also have our full-time resident director. So you've got lots and lots of service and support. Our role is to help be a bridge between what you're learning and the logistics of the program, and also answer any questions, deal with emergencies. If you get sick and need to go to the hospital or to the doctor, we're there to help you with that. If you're having cultural adjustment issues or you don't understand something, we will do our best to help mitigate those sorts of things. And then one thing we always talk about Cuba in particular is that things can change on a very frequent basis. It's not always planned. Everything doesn't happen exactly as it's planned. So we're there to help make that transition as easy as possible and to mitigate all of those issues. So really everything that we are, we become a part of the program. We attend the lectures and do all the visits and trips with you. And so from my perspective, that's one of my favorite aspects, is that I get to learn so much from the faculty members and from the students that participate in these programs, but then also help you while you're in the country. Additionally, we set up all of your housing for you too. And so we're there with you. We don't actually stay with you, but we're right there next to you. So we're able to help in any situation. But basically we are a source of support and help and emergency services, and really, really are there to help make the program as exceptional as we possibly can.
Great, that's fantastic to have so much support. Can you share a little bit more about where students will be staying and what they can expect?
Sure. One of my favorite parts about Cuba is that when our students come there, we live in what are called casas particulares, or kind of like they're like a private home that serves as a residence hall for your group, basically. So these are private homes in the Vedado part of Havana, which is the university district. So you're very close to the actual University of Havana. So it's a really cool part of the city. There's also the really famous hotel, the Hotel Nacional, which is this iconic view of Cuba looking over the Malecon, which is the seawall that runs along the shore. But anyway, the houses themselves are owned by Cuban families, and you live in either double, triple, or quad rooms, depending on the number of participants and the actual layout of the residencia. But you'll share those rooms with the other students on your program, and it'll typically just be your group in the one house, sometimes two, depending again on the size. In this house, you will have a Cuban family, as well as certain staff members too. So many of them, some of them are individuals, like a couple or a small family, and then they'll cook your food for you, they'll clean your rooms for you, do your laundry for you. So it's kind of like living with a host family, but you're with the group of other students that are with your program as well. So it's one kind of big group home, if you will, for the program. The neighborhood of Vedado is one of my absolute favorites in the city of Havana, because it's where there's a lot of great nightlife, there's a lot of great cafes and jazz clubs and parks, and it's super easy to walk around. Havana and Cuba in general is very, very safe. And so we'll talk a lot about that in the pre-departure orientation, as well as once you're on site. But it's a great neighborhood for walking, and there's lots of different opportunities for you to meet local people. There's a famous ice cream shop called Copelia that's really nearby. So it's just an amazingly cool place. And one thing that we encourage is for you to interact with your hosts as much as you can. So talking with them and asking them questions. They love having American students visit and sharing their culture, and they're opening their homes to the students. One thing that kind of takes students by surprise sometimes is that there's not a lot of new things in Cuba, especially in the homes. So a lot of the homes they're very proud of the homes, but they've things that have been in their homes forever. So the items in the home might seem very antiquish, and that's part of the culture of Cuba, is that these homes have been in their families and passed down for years, and they haven't necessarily had access to brand new things for a time. So there's a lot of history, and that's one of my favorite parts, is asking, well, where did this come from, or what's this about, or what? And there's usually always a story attached to those things.
That's wonderful to be able to have that kind of unique insight into a family right in Cuba. And I'm imagining all the wonderful homemade food too.
Yes, the food is amazing. It's one, and that's amazing too. One of the cool things about Cuba is that they cook with what they have. So it's not like you don't necessarily have the same variety of options, but it's always fresh. And it's always so good because it's whatever they were able to get that day. So there's vegetables and rice, and there's the staples of rice and beans and things like that. But it's so wonderful. And there's access to, there's safety. There are 24-hour security people at all these homes as well. You have safes in the rooms where you can put your belongings. And then there's access to clean drinking water the whole time you're there. So the safety is obviously a very important part. And we actually call it the API Village. So we have a number of residencias that we work with, that we've been working with for years. And we know all the families, we know them and their children sometimes. And it's literally a community, a whole community that we have. And it's one of the best parts about the program.
Oh, it sounds fantastic. Thank you, Jason.
Yes.
Well, we're about out of time, but Dr. Newsome, I wanted to come back to you to wrap up. I'd ask, what aspect of the program are you most looking forward to?
Wow, that's hard to pinpoint, but I can say one of the things that's most interested me about the program in and of itself is just the different ways in which we will experience the culture. And you talked about the food, Andrea, and that's something that I'm excited about as well. And just being a part of a culture that is all around us and being able to participate in it, and for us to learn from the people who live in that culture is really exciting to me. And I think that it would provide an experience for the student that is, I don't know, it's kind of priceless when it comes to being able to have material that is right there in your face, and you have to adapt and you have to learn how to not necessarily fit in, but be respectful of another culture. And so I think a part of it is the places that we're going to go, the people that we will encounter, and the ways in which the students will have to learn in the moment how to be respectful of different cultures, and a culture that they may not have ever experienced before. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you very much. Yes, this was great. Thank you so much, Dr. Newsome and Jason, and all of you viewers for joining us. Please, to learn more, you can go to our website to apply, and that's uwstout.edu/study abroad.